The farmhouse creaked under the weight of midnight, its wooden bones settling into the frostbitten silence of the rural night. Ellie, 12 and restless, lay curled beneath a quilt that smelled of hay and her mother's old lavender soap. Her eyes wide as the moon outside traced the ceiling's cracks, each one a map to nowhere. Sleep was a stranger these days, chased off by the hum of her own thoughts, too loud, too fast, like a horse galloping through her skull. Then a sound, not the wind, not the barn's usual groan, but a soft clatter, sharp and deliberate from beyond the window. She sat up, heart skittering. Through the glass, a shadow moved sleek low, darting past the barn's edge. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything she knew. The night held its breath, and so did she, drawn to the flicker of something alive, something cunning stealing through her world. Dawn broke cold, painting the fields in silver frost that crunched under Ellie's boots. The farm sprawled like a tired giant, its fences sagging, its barn doors warped from years of neglect. She followed the trail of scattered corn near the grain shed, her breath puffing in the air like small ghosts. Paw prints, large, deliberate clawed, cut through the mud, weaving a path that vanished into the bramble. Her father's voice echoed from the house, grumbling about another stolen sack, his words heavy with defeat. Ellie knelt, fingers brushing the prints, their edges sharp as secrets. The wind carried a faint musk, wild and unfamiliar, stirring the hairs on her neck. This wasn't just theft, it was a message written in the language of shadows. The farm, her home, felt suddenly vast, a stage for something watching, waiting, slipping through the cracks of dawn. Ellie's mind was a live wire, sparking with questions that burned brighter than the dim glow of her bedside lamp. The thief, those paw prints, that shadow had burrowed into her thoughts, a puzzle she couldn't leave unsolved. She sat cross-legged on her floor, sketching the prints in a worn notebook, her pencil scratching like a heartbeat. Her father's snores rumbled through the thin walls, a reminder of his obliviousness to the mystery unfolding outside. Ellie's chest tightened. She was alone in this, her curiosity a weight both thrilling and heavy. What kind of creature moved so boldly, so silently? Was it hungry or something worse, something clever? She pressed her forehead to the cold window, imagining eyes glinting back. The farm, once her cage, now pulsed with secrets, and her heart raced, torn between fear of the unknown and a desperate need to chase it. Ellie perched on her windowsill, wrapped in a blanket, her breath fogging the glass. The moon hung low, casting the fields in a silver glow that turned the barn's silhouette into a crouching beast. She waited, eyes straining against the dark, until there. A shape, sleek and deliberate, slipped from the hedgerow. The German shepherd paused, its fur a ripple of shadow, and turned its head. Its eyes caught the moonlight, two amber coins flashing with something alive, something knowing. Ellie froze, her pulse a drum in her ears. The dog stared, not moving, as if weighing her worth. Then, with a flick of its tail, it melted into the fog, leaving only the echo of its gaze. She pressed her hand to the glass, a silent vow forming she would find it, this thief in the night. Ellie's world was a patchwork of fields and fences stitched together by the endless rhythm of farm life, but it felt like a cage. At 12, her heart thrummed with a hunger for something bigger, something her mother's stories, whispered years ago under starlit skies, had promised. Those tales of far-off places, of heroes and hidden paths, lingered like ghosts in her memory, fading since her mother left when Ellie was 7, chasing dreams the farm couldn't hold. Now her father's shoulders sagged under debts and drought, his eyes blind to the spark in hers. Ellie traced the notebook sketches of paw prints, each line a rebellion against the monotony that threatened to swallow her. She wasn't just a farmer's daughter. She was a seeker, awake in a sleeping world, her restless heart beating for the mystery that prowled beyond the barn. Dawn broke over the farm like a sigh, gray and unchanging. Ellie moved through her chores, tossing feed to chickens, hauling buckets, mending wire with mechanical precision. Her body present, but her mind elsewhere. The air smelled of damp earth and rust, the barn's warped boards creaking under her steps. She paused to sketch another paw print in the dirt, her fingers smudging the lines as if they could summon the thief. Her father's voice, sharp with frustration, called her back to work, warning of strangers and stolen goods. Ellie nodded, but his words slid past her, irrelevant. Her world was the shadow she'd seen the glint of those eyes. The farm's routine was a slow suffocation, and the thief, whatever it was, felt like the only thing alive, her only escape from the gray. Shadow moved through the night like a phantom, his sleek black and tan fur blending with the darkness, but his scars told a story the shadows couldn't hide. Once he'd been a pup under the iron hand of Charlie's father, a man whose voice cracked like a whip, training him to slip through fences and carry stolen goods in silence. The German shepherd's ribs bore the memory of kicks his ears, the echo of shouted commands. Betrayed when his master vanished, Shadow learned to trust only his own cunning stealing to survive, his amber eyes sharp with mistrust. Now he prowled the farm's edges, driven by hunger, but haunted by the weight of betrayal. Each step was a calculation, each glance a question. Could this place, this girl, be different? His heart, though scarred, still beat with a faint, stubborn hope. Ellie and Shadow were two sides of a cracked mirror, each trapped in their own kind of cage. She saw it in the way he paused at the field's edge, his body tense, watching her with eyes that seemed to measure her soul. Ellie felt it too, a restlessness, a yearning for something beyond the farm's endless chores, beyond the silence her mother left behind. She left scraps by the barn, not daring to approach, and Shadow took them, his gaze lingering longer each night. They were both seekers tethered by invisible chains, hers of routine, his of betrayal. In the quiet under the moon's pale stare, their eyes met across the frost, a wordless recognition. Neither moved closer, but the air between them hummed a fragile thread of understanding, weaving through the night. The fog draped the woods like a shroud, swallowing the world beyond the farm in a haze of gray. Ellie, her heart a wild drum, slipped out the back door, her boots sinking into the damp earth as she followed the shadow that had haunted her nights. The German shepherd Shadow, she'd named him in her mind, darted ahead, a sleek phantom weaving through the pines, his paws silent on the needle-strewn ground. Branches snapped under her steps, the air thick with the scent of moss, and something sharper like fear. Moonlight flickered through the mist, catching his fur in fleeting glints, urging her deeper into the unknown. Each step felt like a leap, her breath hitching as she chased not just a dog, but the pulse of something alive, something that called to the restless spark in her chest. Ellie froze in the woods, her flashlight trembling in her hand as the fog pressed closer, cold as a whisper. Shadow had vanished into the mist, but now she heard it, a faint whine, sharp with pain, cutting through the silence. Her mind churned. What if he was dangerous, a thief's tool, not a friend? Her father's warnings echoed, urging her to turn back to the safety of the farmhouse. But then a rustle Shadow's form emerged, one paw caught in a rusted wire trap, his eyes wide with something raw, not anger, but fear. Ellie's breath caught. He was no monster, just a creature cornered by the world. Her fear dissolved into a tug of compassion, a need to free him, to prove to herself and to him that she was more than the farm's shadow. Ellie knelt in the damp earth, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with the rusted wire trapping Shadow's paw. The fog swirled around them, a cold veil that made the world feel small. Just her, the dog, and the sharp snap of metal. Shadow's eyes locked on hers, amber, and unblinking, his body rigid, but not snarling, a silent test. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from the weight of this moment, this choice. She whispered, "Hold on." I got you, her voice barely a breath as the wire gave way. Shadow flinched free, but still his gaze holding hers like a question she couldn't yet answer. She stood, hands shaking, knowing she'd crossed a line into his world, into something bigger than herself, something that wouldn't let her turn back. Ellie reached into her pocket, pulling out a crumpled biscuit, its edges soft from the night's damp. She set it on the ground, stepping back, her eyes never leaving Shadow. He hesitated, his nose twitching, then crept forward, his movements slow, deliberate, like a dancer testing a stage. He took the biscuit, his warmth brushing her outstretched fingers, a fleeting heat in the cold. Ellie's chest tightened, a promise was forming, unspoken but heavy. "You're not alone." She murmured the words more for herself than him. Shadow's ears flicked, and he lingered, not fleeing, his silhouette sharp against the fading fog. As Ellie turned back toward the farm, she felt his gaze follow a fragile pact, sealed in the quiet binding them to a path neither could yet see. The barn's shadow stretched long across the frostbitten field, a dark finger pointing to where Shadow lurked. Ellie spotted him at dusk, his sleek form crouched near the hay bales, eyes glinting like struck flint. She paused mid-step, her bucket of chicken feed forgotten, the air thick with the scent of straw and tension. Shadow's low growl rumbled, a warning woven with mistrust, his body coiled as if ready to vanish. Ellie set a scrap of bread on the ground, stepping back slowly, her hands open to show she meant no harm. She didn't push closer, didn't speak, letting the silence speak for her. His gaze held hers sharp, and searching a challenge she met with steady patience. The farm felt alive with his presence, but the distance between them was a chasm guarded by his scars and her hope. Rain tapped the barn's tin roof, a soft drum roll, sealing Ellie and Shadow in a pocket of quiet. She sat on a hay bale, her knees drawn up, watching the German shepherd huddle just inside the doorway, his fur damp and gleaming. The air smelled of wet earth and old wood, heavy with unspoken things. Ellie tore a piece of her sandwich, setting it on the ground between them, not too close. Shadow's eyes flicked to it, then to her, his body still, but his ears alert. He inched forward, taking the bread without touching her, his breath a faint cloud in the chill. They sat in silence, two solitary souls sharing the storm's shelter, their wariness softening like the rain-soaked earth. Ellie's heart eased, sensing the first thread of trust weaving through their quiet vigil. The bucket slipped from Ellie's hands, clattering against the barn's wooden floor, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the morning's quiet. Shadow flinched, his body dropping low, ears pinned back, a low whine escaping his throat. His eyes, wide and distant, seemed to see something beyond the barn. Cruel hands, a barked command, the sting of a leather strap. Ellie froze, her own heart lurching as the echo of her mother's laughter flickered in her mind, a memory of a time when the farm felt like home. She knelt slowly, humming a soft tune her mother once sang, the notes trembling in the air. Shadow's head tilted, his whine fading, his gaze locking onto her as if hearing something familiar. The moment hung fragile, their pasts whispering through the space between them, tying their pain with a thread of shared longing. The dawn painted the fields gold, the air crisp with the promise of a new day. Ellie, emboldened by a restless impulse, tossed a stick across the yard, its arc slicing through the morning mist. Shadow's ears pricked his body, tensing before he sprang after it, his paws kicking up dew-soaked grass. A laugh burst from Ellie, bright and unguarded, the sound startling them both. Shadow paused, the stick in his jaws, his tail giving a hesitant flick. She knelt, offering a crust of bread from her hand, and this time he took it gently, his muzzle warm against her fingers. The farm seemed to glow, the barn's shadows softening, as if the world had exhaled. Their eyes met, a spark of joy kindling between them, warming the cold edges of their guarded hearts. The night was a velvet curtain, pierced only by the faint glow of fireflies and the distant hum of crickets. Ellie sat on the porch, her knees tucked under her chin, the air heavy with the scent of hay and earth. Shadow lingered at the yard's edge, his silhouette a dark promise against the starlit field. Then, without warning, he moved slow, deliberate, his paws silent on the grass. He stopped before her, his amber eyes soft, and rested his head on her knee, the weight warm and steady. Ellie's breath caught tears pricking as her fingers sank into his fur, finding scars beneath the warmth. A sob escaped her, quiet but raw, as Shadow leaned closer, his body easing against hers. In that moment he chose her, and she him, their trust. A flame kindled in the dark, unyielding and true. The farm's peace frayed like an old rope, the air growing taut with unseen menace. Shadow paced the field's edge at dusk. His hackles raised, a low growl rumbling as he stared into the gathering dark. Ellie watched from the barn, her heart quickening, the familiar comfort of their routine now tinged with unease. His ears twitched at sounds she couldn't hear, distant footsteps perhaps, or the snap of a twig beyond the hedgerow. The fields, once a sanctuary, felt exposed, their shadows stretching too long, too alive. Shadow's eyes darted to her, urgent, as if warning of a storm she couldn't yet see. Ellie's fingers tightened on the pitchfork, her pulse echoing his instincts, sensing the past creeping closer, its claws hidden in the night's deepening folds. The farmyard was still, but the air crackled with tension as a figure emerged from the dusk. Charlie, his smile sharp as a blade, claiming he'd come to check on missing goods. Ellie's stomach twisted. His charm felt like oil on water, slick and wrong. Shadow's growl cut through the silence, low and guttural, his body rigid as he stared at Charlie, eyes blazing with recognition. Memories surged in the dog's flinch. Charlie's father, his harsh voice, the sting of a chain, and Ellie saw it, the ghost of betrayal, in Shadow's trembling frame. Charlie's gaze flicked to the dog, his smile faltering, betraying a history Ellie didn't yet know. Her hand tightened on Shadow's scruff, her suspicion flaring as the charming thief's presence stirred a darkness that linked him to Shadow's scars. The barn's dim light flickered as Charlie's men stepped from the shadows, their boots heavy on the creaking boards. Ellie's heart hammered, trapped between hay bales as Charlie's voice turned cold, admitting the truth. Shadow was trained by his father, part of a network of animals stealing for a hidden mastermind. Shadow lunged, teeth bared, a protective snarl tearing through the air as he shielded Ellie, his body a wall of fury. Charlie's eyes widened, caught off guard by the dog's defiance, his men hesitating as Ellie shouted, "You can't have him!" The standoff crackled raw and electric, with Shadow's growls echoing the pain of his past. Ellie's fear burned into resolve, her voice steady as she faced Charlie, the barn, a crucible where betrayal and loyalty collided, binding her and Shadow against the looming threat. The woods swallowed Ellie and Shadow as they fled the night's chill, biting at their heels. Hidden in a hollow of tangled roots, Ellie's hands shook as she pressed a cloth to Shadow's scratches, his fur matted with blood from the barn's chaos. His amber eyes steady, despite the pain locked onto hers, a silent anchor in the dark. She whispered, "I won't let them take you," her voice a thread of defiance against the fear clawing her chest. Shadow pressed closer, his warmth a shield against the cold, his breath steadying her own. The forest hummed with danger, Charlie's shadow lingering, but in that moment their bond hardened, a vow forged in shared escape, a promise to face whatever came next together, their trust, a flickering light against the encroaching night. Dawn bled through the fog, casting the woods in a ghostly half-light as Ellie and Shadow crept toward the thieves' hideout. Shadow's ears twitched, his nose low, catching scents of oil and smoke on the wind. Ellie followed, her heart a tight knot, each rustle of leaves a warning. Footprints in the mud, human heavy, led to an old mill, its silhouette looming like a crouching beast. Shadow's hackles rose, his body taut, sensing eyes in the shadows before Ellie could. The air grew thick, charged with the weight of being watched, the crunch of gravel under distant boots echoing like a pulse. Ellie's hand rested on Shadow's back. Their steps synced as they moved closer to the heart of the danger, driven by a shared resolve to end the threat that bound them to this hunt. The old mill's walls groaned under the weight of decay, its air thick with dust and the sharp tang of rust. Ellie and Shadow slipped inside shadows among shadows, the floor creaking beneath their cautious steps. A figure emerged, the mastermind, a man with eyes like polished stone, his voice cold as he mocked their intrusion. Charlie stood at his side, his charm gone, his face a mask of guilt and defiance. Shadow's growl rumbled, a primal warning, as the man's men closed in, their boots scraping like claws. Ellie's heart thundered, her hand gripping Shadow's fur as the trap snapped shut, rope's blades a cage for the dog who'd defied them. The threat was real, life or death, the mill, a crucible where loyalty faced its final test, and Ellie knew escape would demand everything they had. Ellie's voice cracked the mill's tense air, taunting the mastermind with questions to draw his focus, her words a desperate shield. Shadow seized the moment, lunging with a snarl, his teeth flashing as he bowled over one of the men, freeing Ellie from their grasp. She scrambled, grabbing a rusted pipe, swinging it to keep the others at bay. Shadow's barks echoed, fierce and unyielding, his body a blur of loyalty protecting her. The mastermind faltered, his men scattering as the operation crumbled under their combined defiance. Charlie fled into the night, his vow of revenge a fading hiss. Ellie and Shadow stood together, breathless, the mill silent but for their pounding hearts. Their choice to protect each other sealed their bond, a triumph carved in the dust of their stand. The farmhouse glowed under the soft lamplight, a fragile sanctuary against the night's lingering chill. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor. Shadow sprawled beside her, his fur still matted from the mill's chaos. She dabbed at his wounds with a damp cloth, her movements slow, deliberate, as if stitching their shared survival into the quiet. The air smelled of antiseptic and hay, the silence heavy with the weight of what they'd endured. Shadow's eyes, half closed, followed her hands, his breathing steady, a rhythm that calmed her racing heart. Her father slept upstairs, unaware of the battle won the farm, now a haven reclaimed. Yet Charlie's shadow clung to the edges of her mind, a faint threat whispering in the dark, tempered by the warmth of Shadow's presence beside her. Days bled into weeks, the farm settling into a rhythm of quiet healing. Shadow trailed Ellie through the fields, his steps lighter, his eyes brighter, no longer darting to every shadow. She tossed him scraps at supper, his muzzle brushing her hand, a ritual that felt like a vow renewed daily. The air carried the scent of fresh earth, the fields waking under their shared footsteps. Ellie's laughter, once rare, spilled freely when Shadow chased a butterfly, his tail wagging like a metronome. Their bond grew in small moments, his head resting on her foot, her fingers tracing his scars, each glance a mirror of their recovery. The farm, once a cage, now felt vast with possibility, their trust a steady pulse weaving through the days, binding them closer as the thread of the past faded to a distant echo. Morning broke over the fields, the sun spilling gold across the dew-kissed grass. Ellie stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the crisp air, and called softly, "Shadow." The German shepherd's ears pricked, and he trotted to her side, his stride sure, his eyes bright with a trust that felt like a gift. Their steps fell into sync as they walked the farm's edge, her boots and his paws leaving twin trails in the soft earth. The horizon stretched wide, a canvas of quiet promise, though Charlie's lingering threat hovered like a faint cloud. Ellie's hand brushed Shadow's fur, his warmth steadying her. In that moment, their bond was a quiet rebirth, a shared rhythm of survival and hope carrying them forward side by side into the light.